What's up, my friends? I'm back today with another book that I want to talk about. Today, I want to take a look at Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire. This is the first novella in the Wayward Children series. I did not realize this was a series when I first started reading this book. I thought it was just going to be a nice little novella and then I was going to be done, but it turns out there are probably like 9 or 10 of these books out there, so we got a lot to go for. This novella takes a look at what happens to the children that come back to this world from lands far away. Children who have had doors that have opened in front of them to other worlds, just like Alice, though every door leads to a different world. One where the Spider Queen rules over her web of control, a world of rainbows and flying unicorns. This book has an explanatory breakdown about the classifications of all these different worlds that these children find themselves in, and this provides somewhat of a hard magic explanation for it, but it keeps it soft in its approach, because it doesn't give too much of an explanation beyond the classifications that these in-world people have given to these doors and the worlds beyond. I think it's a really interesting approach to the way that it tells its story. Alice in Wonderland or similar stories are incredibly soft in their magic, and here there isn't really any hard magic applied either. It's more of a convention that the characters have created to have any grasp on the many worlds that they themselves have experienced. I think this is a really useful tool that Seanan McGuire is pulling from hard magic systems to have more of a semblance of understanding on this world and how it works. With this theoretical axis of worlds that the characters can easily explain what world they're from efficiently. Are they from a high nonsense world like Alice, or high logic like Fillory from The Magicians or Narnia? Did they end up in a high virtue world like Fantasia from The Neverending Story, or high wicked like Midworld from The Gunslinger, or Other Mother's Land in Coraline? This axis has other secondary characteristics like high whimsy, but all of this is more for having a concrete foundation of possibilities that this world can open up to than actually laying out rules or universal laws for how are these worlds created, how do doors show up. All of that is the soft part. The hard aspects are more exclusively there to create a language that the author can then use in their story to convey a lot of information in as few words as possible. And this mix of soft and hard magic really allows this world to be explored without needing to have full understanding of those things. It gives Seanan a lot more free reign to have things change and be more amalgamous as we go along in these stories. But once they leave those worlds, wicked or virtuous, logical or nonsensical, all the children find themselves, one way or another, showing up at the doorstep of a boarding school slash kind of like a mental health facility vibe slash orphanage style home run by someone who too has gone through her own door and can no longer go back. She seeks to help out those younger than her, to keep them from suffering as she had, with no support structures to believe in her adventures or in the trauma she experienced, or to support these emotions and changes that she's made as she's come back from this door. This book really questions how can you put up with the mundanity and expectations of this world when leaving one that felt so much more like home than this one ever will. There is a clear meta commentary about reading. I'm not sure any writer who has read a lot of books isn't going to have a meta commentary about reading somewhere in their work, but there are more important themes of self-acceptance and loss that permeate this book so fully. I think it's quite easy to glance past that meta commentary for the more important aspects that this book is trying to talk about. This novella is short, like 44,000 words short. I read this in about a single sitting short. It is so dense, filled with character and prose that blew me away. There is a certain control that Seanan McGuire has over this story that I think can be rare to find. Control of tone to move so fluidly from lighthearted to grim with a single line break. Control over pace to somehow fill this world, allow a reader to feel like it's lived in and explored, and tell its story it wishes to without feeling so rushed in this short page count. The characters that fill these pages are rich, filled with life and pain. Characters we see for only a paragraph leave a lasting impression. They serve as doorways to other stories we will never get to hear. Feeling a sense of sonder for a character in a book is something that feels weird. Oftentimes, characters that would instill this sense of knowing that they have a fully fleshed out life behind them is not something you're going to get from a side character, and any main character, you're going to see their whole story so you can understand that better. But this book is able to do that with those side characters, those tertiary characters that are only getting a few lines of dialogue here or there. And that shows so much strength in the way that Seanan McGuire is able to convey her ideas in this story. There's a ton going on in this book. I'm sure this could have been way longer. I'm sure many people after finishing this book wish that it was lives way longer. I think that it accomplishes what it wants to do, and it sets up for the need and desire in the reader to keep going and to pick up the next of these tons of novellas. And thankfully they're so short, so you can continue coming back to this series every once in a while. Finish a book in a day is like a nice palate cleanser for those long tomes you're reading. It feels fulfilling. And those other novellas give us those opportunities to be able to take a peek into those stories that are only hinted at here. This book does have a mystery subplot that perhaps doesn't get the spotlight that it probably should have, but I didn't keep turning pages for the mystery. I kept turning pages because I wanted to keep living in this world and interacting with these characters. And so the mystery may be where I levy some criticism. I think it was certainly interesting, but there's a level of dumb that the characters have to be forced down to ignore some of the more obvious clues that they are provided. There's a slight frustration that I had when a very clear warning sign took place and the reaction from the characters was, oh, what can it mean? Maybe this isn't a real hint. Maybe we did something wrong. It was clearly a clue. It was clearly the most obvious clue, and it didn't require some crazy intellectual leap to come to the conclusion that you're expected to. It makes it feel like they're helping out the reader in coming to this conclusion before the characters, when these characters should have been able to come to this conclusion just as easily. I do feel like other aspects of this mystery are done really well. They show good setup for the hints to come and the actions that are taking place. Then the mystery just kind of comes to its conclusion. It didn't ruin the experience of reading the story for me. The mystery is certainly the thing that sticks out as the glaring issue of this book. Our main character's story, being new to the House for Wayward Children, is the most interesting part. The way that she interacts with these other characters that have been here for a while, the way that she interacts with the adults who are finally empathizing with the emotions and the experiences that she's had. Those aspects of the story are what kept me reading here. The coming together of these characters from far off worlds and seeing how those worlds have shaped them and how they interact with each other. There's an undercutting to this, however, that I think slightly hurts the story near the end. I don't want to talk about spoilers too much here. I feel like it's best to go into this book completely blind, other than the information that I'm providing is more of a pitch. I just feel like there was a bit of something missing from this ending that I would have liked to have seen for Nancy, our main character. I do also want to talk about the general tone of the characters and how they speak and how they act throughout this book. It's fair to say that they're all affected by their time in the other worlds. As such, this impacts both their way of speaking and also their mental maturity to some level, or not necessarily maturity, but just the way that they think. Nancy suffers from this the most, that I think, in kind of a negative way from the aspect of reading about her. There's a bunch of interactions that she has with other characters where they'll say something that for the reader can be easily inferred what they're talking about. Anytime they reference something like, oh, I'm from a nonsense world, it's fair to conclude exactly what they're referencing there. But Nancy isn't able to make that leap to a conclusion. It's mentioned in the book by the owner of the home that she is from a world where you have to be very explicit and precise when speaking with her. And I want to give the benefit of the doubt that the frustrations that I'm feeling aren't from poor writing, and more as an example of further characterizing Nancy, how straightforward you have to be when speaking with Nancy. It came up a few times and was still frustrating to read nonetheless. Though on the positive side, there are conversations, grim or sexual or just more mature in content, that showcase these are still teens handling things about as well as teenagers would in a realistic way. I appreciated that. Teens are just tiny adults with a little bit more angst and crudeness. That comes off here really well. It allows for a bit more of a reasonable exploration into the representation that we get here, both of asexuality in Nancy and our trans character, Cade. It was really awesome to see ace and trans representation in the core group, and the writing doesn't baby these characters. That's really important when you're writing teenagers. You need to write them to be teenagers. You can't have them be 16, 17 and acting like really innocent children, nor can you write them to be wise adults who can always make very intelligent decisions. Having them be realistic in making those brash decisions or jumping to conclusions, but also maintaining some amount of being mature is something that really catches me in a story. This is all to say that Seanan McGuire can really write realistic teenagers, and that's an aspect that really shined through in this novella, and I hope that it will continue to shine through moving forward with the rest of them. I really enjoyed this book. I think that this one is particularly a bit more of a coin flip on whether or not you'll like it. Either you'll will really enjoy this aesthetic and the tonality of all of it, be able to just kind of coast on that, or the issues that I kind of spoke about earlier will bother you too much and you'll have to put this book down. I think both reactions are really fair, and this isn't one of my top 10 stories of all time, but I do think it's a really enjoyable read. It was able to instill in me emotions that I normally don't get when I'm reading a story. I think that this story could really be slept on, and for those that would maybe enjoy it, I really had to talk about it and get it out there and have it in the hands of more people. I think Seanan McGuire does a lot really well in this story. She creates her own voice and style in a story archetype we've seen before. Like I've said, this is a series of novellas. I think there's at least 7 or 8 out, with a promise of around 10, I want to say, from what I was reading before this. Fun, quick little stories. You can read in like a day or two. And if anything that I had to say about this first story was interesting to you, I think you should definitely check them out. I'll give this first one like, I don't know, 2 out of 3 of Dorothy's traveling companions. Have you read this series? Did you find these books as enjoyable as I have, or were the issues just a bit too much for you to really enjoy it the way that I did? Let me know in those comments down below. And if you found anything that I had to say interesting here, please hit that little like button. And if you haven't yet, why don't you hit that subscribe button? I'm quickly approaching 500 subs right now, which means we can open that Discord to start having, like, I don't know, monthly book reads or something. I'll catch you in the next one. And until then, stay lit.